Hello and welcome to Scream Scene, the horror movie podcast, where we watch every horror movie ever made in chronological order, and then we rank them from best to worst. My name's Ben.
And I'm Sarah.
Thank you for listening to us today. How are you doing today, Sarah?
Doing all right. It's been an eventful weekend, the first weekend after Halloween. So happy November to all of our creatures of the night. Yeah, went to a rally yesterday against the use of the notwithstanding clause here in Alberta.
Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah, it's very bad.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm all right. I could be better if I'm being honest. I've got a leg pain, foot pain situation that we think is plantar fasciitis, which I'm sure everyone listening to this knows what that is because I'm the only person who didn't know, apparently. So I'm kind of dealing with that. My primary computer has a busted CPU fan, and I need to get it repaired. So that's stressful. You know, but like in the grand scheme of things, can I really complain?
You know what could always make you feel a little better? Listening to some stuff we have up on Patreon.
That's right. We have some really cool stuff that went onto Patreon in October to celebrate Halloween. You can listen to an interview Sarah did with me talking about my new reconstruction of the 1925 version of Phantom of the Opera, which we're going to be showing here in Calgary at the National Music Center with a live organ score on the 27th of November. So you can book those plane tickets. And Sarah did yet another one of her wonderful horror short story, little audio drama performances with her excellent narration and sound effects and music. So lots of cool things to listen to over on our Patreon at patreon.com/screamscenepodcast.
Yeah, I made the audiobook adaptation of The House of Silence by Edith Nesbit. It's available for like purchase, basically, if you don't want to become a patron, but you would like to take a listen. I think it's up for like $5. And I also put up all of the other ones, including the original one that I did, or I should clarify, by original, I mean like the very first one I did, not original work, of Carmilla, which was in like 5 parts or 4 parts because it's a novella.
Yeah.
And those are up for like $3 per part. So if you just want to try it out, see what the heck I do in my free time, you can check that out.
But we super appreciate it if you do decide to become a patron and go the monthly subscription route, in which case you don't have to pay extra for any of that stuff.
No.
It'll just go up on, whatever tier in the Patreon that you've signed up for that is appropriate to the bonus material you're receiving.
Glad we got some business done at the top of the show. On to next business.
Yes.
What are we watching today?
Well, Sarah, tonight we are watching GRITOS en la noche from 1962, which translates to Screams in the Night, but it's probably better known by either its French or English titles. The French title is L'Horrible, right? Horrible. L'Horrible Docteur Orloff, or The Awful Dr. Orloff, directed by Jesus Franco, or as he's credited on the French version of this movie, Jess Frank.
Jess Frank.
And probably best known.
Just Frank.
It's just Frank. Probably best known as Jess Franco in English. And this is our first horror film that we are seeing from Jess Franco, but it is not going to be the last. As people probably already know, Franco is a director who was immensely prolific, not just in the horror genre, but he's probably best remembered for his horror films. So we're going to be seeing a lot of him in the future. It also happens to be our first horror film from Spain.
Yes. Or C.
So yeah, we haven't looked at Spain at all. It hasn't even really come up when talking about like alternate versions of movies or as like an international market or like it just hasn't come up at all.
They've been busy.
Yeah, so I thought it might be good to give our listeners a bit of a grounding in what was happening in Spain in 1962 because I feel like
it's a blind spot.
Yeah, for a lot of people.
Because when I think about Spain and what would be happening in Spain in the 20th century, what I think of, honestly, is Ernest Hemingway and the Spanish Civil War.
Yeah, like there's the Spanish-American War at the start of the 20th century, which, of course, I learned about from Citizen Kane. And then there's the Spanish Civil War, which, of course, I learned about from For Whom the Bell Tolls. And then there's a huge blind spot until SNL comes on the air in America and informs everyone on Weekend Update that Franco is still dead, I believe was the joke. So, yeah, big blind spot in the middle there. Maybe you can help fill us in, Sarah.
For sure. So you today are talking about Jesus Franco. I'm talking about a completely different Franco named Francisco Franco. Because I feel like this is a good place to kind of start.
Yeah.
So, Ben, you mentioned the Spanish-American War of 1898. That is 6 years after Francisco Franco was born. But I think it's important to kind of mention because that was a war that kind of spelled the end of colonial Spain. Spain lost its colonies in the Philippines, Puerto Rico, Guam, over to the United States, and Cuba became a protectorate of the United States, ironically. The reason why Spain, there's interesting analysis about the War of 1898 that I'm not going to go into detail on because this is a horror movie podcast, but there's analysis that suggests that Spain went into the war knowing that they would lose because it was either like lose their colonies in the face of a war or lose them because the colonies have claimed independence.
More honorable to lose them to an enemy in war, I guess.
Yeah, real Klingon shit.
I think the U.S. also got the Panama Canal out of that deal. Like they got Panama so they could make the Panama Canal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's some interesting context for like where Spain is at when Francisco Franco is a child. Who is Francisco Franco? Well, he was the leader and honestly dictator of Spain from 1939 to 1974. He grew up
It's a big long run for a dictator.
Oh yeah.
Like they don't usually, they often do not last that long. So
yeah, until his death.
Right.
Like old age, natural death.
Yeah. Which is also like not usual for a dictator.
So he was born to a like well-off military family. So he naturally became an officer in the Spanish army and was one of the youngest to earn the rank of brigadier general in 1926 when he was only 33.
Yeah, that's young.
So Spain, if it's not Spanish Civil War and Hemingway, that comes to mind. The other thing about Spain that will come up in your brain probably is Catholicism and the monarchy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, keep those in mind. In 1931, so 5 years after Franco became brigadier general, King Alfonso VIII was deposed, and there was a Spanish Republic set up. Technically, the second Spanish Republic, but I won't go into that. Franco continued to lead in the now Republican army, but he was still very pro-monarchy. And he actually was... I couldn't find out whether he was like particularly religious. I might just not have like been able to cover it in my research, but he had expressed regrets about, cool, we have this republic, but I really liked the monarchy. A lot of the work that he did as in the army was very pro-monarchy.
Sure. So he's conservative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you have this like very ambitious young military leader who doesn't fully agree with the status quo or this new authority. He gets kept away from Spain and is sent to its colonies to kind of manage things there, specifically its colonies in Africa and like Morocco. Mm-hmm. However, you can kind of see the writing on the wall because in July 1936, there was a military coup against the Republic. They didn't fully succeed, and that plunged the country into the Spanish Civil War. So you have the Republicans who are very like explicitly anti-Catholicism and any kind of religion, really. They are progressive in, let's say, like women's rights, but also like not necessarily progressive in like how we would describe them today.
Well, sure. If you're progressive in the 30s, you're conservative now. That's just kind of how time works.
I just want to make it clear that like just because they have some progressive and in some cases leftist policies does not mean that they were necessarily good guys.
Sure.
Because they did, when they established the Republic, they did kill through executions a few thousand people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the Civil War, we have these Republicans, and then we have the nationalists who have the military power behind them. They are conservative, but you do have different factions. They all are a little like fascist and right wing, some more fascy than others. Basically, for the Civil War, different areas of the country and different, like, say, provinces would be under Republican control and others would be under national control. So there's a lot of fighting going on. And at one point, all of the nationalist leaders are kind of killed in one way or another due to the conflict, leaving just Franco. So he kind of takes
Not
control.
just Franco.
Oh, yeah. Let me be clear. Francisco Franco.
Just Francisco Franco.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So he declares himself general of the nationalist movement.
Generalissimo.
Exactly. Generalissimo. So he consolidates the groups, and then with support from the Nazi Germany and Mussolini Italian governments, the nationalist side wins in the Civil War. That is in 1939. So that's the year that World War II starts. Now, Spain, its politics and everything, especially under Franco, do align with what Hitler and Mussolini are doing in continental Europe. But because of the Civil War, and it was very devastating to the country, they aren't really able to contribute. And also, Franco wanted to he wanted some distance because Hitler was very anti-religion and Franco's very Catholicism. Being Catholic, and the Roman Catholic in particular, that's a symbol of Spain.
Interesting. Yeah, because like you would think that because the nationalists trended towards fascism and Hitler and Mussolini came in and like helped their cause, that probably the thinking of why you would do that is to win yourself another ally in Europe for your big European takeover plan, later that year. And then Franco's like, no, actually I'm going to like stay home and focus on my own shit.
Once Franco comes to power of the entire country, he begins what's known as the White Terror, where across the country, over 150,000 people were killed because they were not seen as being part of Spain's identity.
Right. Not Spanish enough.
Not Spanish enough. So these could have been Republicans. These could have been Jewish people. These could have been queer people,
Right. It was 1939, so nobody expected the Spanish Inquisition.
Okay. Let's pause there and talk about film in Spain.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Spain has had a film industry since 1895, obviously with silence. And the height of the silent cinema for Spain was reached in like 1930. They were pumping out movies and they were like made in Spain. Madrid was kind of the central place where things were being produced. And then talkies came in And sound decimated the industry. In 1930, they released 58 films in the country. And in 1931, with sound, 1 film was released. It started to get its legs again, but then the Civil War hit.
Sure.
And because of the level of destruction of the Civil War, less than 10% of film before the war survives.
Wow.
They were actually burning the films to use the cellulite for something else.
Yeah.
I don't really understand how it works, but, they were doing that. During the Civil War, both Republicans and nationalists were using film as propaganda, which is interesting to think about, right? We're so localized in these different regions, and yet we're putting efforts towards propaganda films for that specific area where you were, and you're showing it to your specific region.
Mm-hmm.
So once he came to power, Franco established the National Department of Cinematography and Censorship, which was the way of enforcing censorship on film in particular. So I kind of mentioned this, but Francoist Spain had a non-belligerent pact with Germany and Italy. So, I'm not explicitly going to get involved with you. But Franco did allow them to use Spanish ports. We'll let you use our stuff, but we can't actively help. He downsized the army because, you don't want another coup.
Right.
And allowed many of those soldiers who now have nothing to do to go volunteer to fight with the Axis.
Okay, gotcha. So it's all sort of officially there's no connection here, but we're friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I mentioned the White Terror against Republicans, but also undesirables, quote unquote undesirables. Franco was also a believer of anti-Semitic conspiracies.
Sure.
Right up until he died. He was persecuting Jews. As he's doing the White Terror, he's also wanting to solidify what a Spanish identity is, because his main goal once he took power of the country was to unite everyone under that one identity, to the point where they shut their borders to other economic trading. We're going to do it alone. We're very isolationist.
Right, yeah. Which is a pretty typical fascist move, is to get very hung up on national identity and be sort of enforcing a purity of that national identity, and trying to be so into your own country that you're sort of putting up borders and tariffs to other countries.
Subtle.
So he's making Spain great again.
Yeah. And under this one identity, it is explicitly Spanish Catholic and having an emphasis on Spanish traditions like bullfighting or flamenco.
Sure.
Ironically, a lot of what was considered a Spanish cultural tradition was a little wishy-washy and determined by Franco's own opinions. For example, flamenco, it comes from a particular region of Spain. It's not really, before this point, considered something all of Spain participates in, but a different region's dance was no, outlaw that. That can't be allowed.
It's like those guys who keep trying to make square dancing the national dance of the United States.
And of course, he uses film to emphasize this identity. He establishes the Directorate General of Cinema and Theater in 1946, just called the DGCT. And this is the main censorship office at this point. It is specifically meant to establish a Spanish film industry, not really allowed any imports. If you bring anything in, it has to be dubbed into Spanish. And this almost to the point of exclusion, Spanish film industry policies leads to the US companies basically going well, fine, we just won't play ball with you, Spain.
Yeah, sure.
Just not an explicit boycott, but just okay, fine, you do you. We'll be over here.
Yeah, we don't need you.
Exactly. Now, World War II, saw the end of Franco's allies in Germany and Italy, to the point where seeing who the winner was, Franco's government destroyed documents about them being friendly with them at all. Now, Spain was excluded from the Marshall Plan because they weren't involved in the war. The Marshall Plan is meant to help get the war-torn countries back on their feet. So why would Spain be included, right? So these other countries are getting a leg up while Spain is still struggling after the Civil War.
Interesting because, Spain was, for all intents and purposes, fascist. And the war was very much this liberal democracy and communism versus fascism. And the post-war order, they defeated fascism. So everything became about liberal democracy versus communism. And it's Franco's out here the last fascist standing in the musical chairs game and doesn't really have a part in that sort of bifurcated nature of the world.
Yeah. So by late 40s, early 50s, his government had kind of figured out that hey, closing off our borders means that we are modernizing much more slowly. We're getting back on our feet much more slowly than these other countries. So why don't we start seeing how we can enter the world stage again? I think that's why this is 1946 is when the DGCT gets established, because, okay, if other cultural products are going to come in, here's how we're going to allow them in. And this is when the Francoist government begins to be hey, maybe we're fascist, maybe we're not, but we're definitely anti-communist.
Right.
Hi, US.
Yeah.
So in 1953, between Spain and the US, they established the Madrid Pact, which is kind of signals a gradual opening up of Spain in an economic sense. This ultimately leads to what is known as the Spanish Miracle, really beginning in 1959. So really big economic boom. I had talked a bit about the Japanese Miracle, basically, right, when we covered some Japanese movies, and that came out after the economic boom after the Korean War. Japan's economic boom was unseen of worldwide. Spain, pretty close right behind. That's how big of a boom they saw. As they are starting to open up, that proves some positive impacts on the film industry. The 1955 film Miracle of Marcelino saw worldwide acclaim. It's a musical with child actors, which spawned a lot of musicals, and then also almost a cottage industry of children actors in Spain.
Weird.
Also in the 50s, specifically 1951, a ministry gets created called the Ministry of Information and Tourism, which really starts funding touristic cinema and being hey, people, don't you want to come visit Spain? Give us money and support our economy by visiting our lovely towns and see bullfighting and flamenco dancers. Mm-hmm. In addition to these very strange subgenres of tourist films and child musicals, the main genres that we're seeing in the 50s in Spain are melodrama, black comedy, and this genre that's called Esperanto, which borrows the name from a Spanish literary genre where it's almost using black comedy, or at the very least detached irony, to give social critique.
Oh, interesting.
And social commentary. And in fact, through the 50s, the film industry was very active in trying to do social critique and commentary of the Francoist government, finding many different ways to try to circumvent these censorship rules, including co-productions, typically with France or Italy. The other thing that's kind of boosting the Spanish film industry at this point is in the 50s and 60s, there are a lot of American epics, sword and sandal epics and stuff. And so they're shooting in Spain because, we can make it cheap.
Yeah, and Spain becomes a huge shooting location through the 50s, 60s, 70s. I don't know, maybe later than that, but certainly those 3 decades, because for a lot of these big epics, especially the big historical epics, there's this sense that you can't really get locations in North America or Europe that look like medieval Europe or colonial America or, Roman Italy or whatever, because everything's become so modernized, except in these big expanses of like Spanish wilderness.
Exactly. And that has the bonus of either giving Spanish crew work or allowing them to learn directly from whichever high-profile crew members come from the United States, for example. Now, there's no Spanish horror really until this movie. There were dramas in the 40s that had supernatural themes. Never really would call them horror, but, there's like that feeling percolating. There were even, if not dramas, then like things inspired by horror movies. So Edgar Neville has a movie from 1944 that is called La Torre de los Horribles. Apologies for my Spanish pronunciation. My brain always tries to go to French. But it's a Caligari tribute.
Okay. Yeah, like typically we've seen fascist governments like not be super into horror movies. So this makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. So this is like the first horror movie in Spain. Horror in Spain really finds its place and blooms starting in 1968 into this genre called fantaterror, which really brings in like fantasy and terror, basically. So it might not necessarily be horror in the same way that film noir kind of is using horror elements, but isn't really horror.
They're like supernatural crime movies.
Exactly. Yeah. So, you can see horror in there, but they aren't necessarily horror. But that's, 6 years in the future from this current year. I think just to kind of wrap up where Spain is at in 1962, they're becoming more buddies with America as well as Western powers writ large, thanks to the Cold War and being anti-communist. That's also prompted almost a re-examination of Francisco Franco and his government as, are they really fascist? Lots of interesting discussions about, it wasn't a homogenous right-wing group. He had a bunch of different groups. So because of that pluralism, clearly he couldn't really be fascist. Well, maybe he had fascist leanings. He was definitely totalitarian. Just like this weird, like, hemming and hawing about whether he actually counts as fascist because we're supposed to be friends with him right now.
Yeah.
And like of the people who he persecuted in his country, they're lefties, they're communists. Those people aren't, they're anti-religion, they're Jews, they're queers. Who really cares about them?
I mean,
like he was signing death warrants up until his own death.
Like, I think the thing is, and you can cut this out if I go too far, but like before World War II, like the main political sort of conflict gripping Europe was, not just in terms of physical conflict, but like intellectual conflict and so on, was like fascism versus communism. Like those were two entities that you could always kind of count on to hate each other. And so, then America comes in and reluctantly comes in, right? It should be said, to save Europe from fascism, and they defeat the Nazis. And then like immediately afterwards find themselves on the other side of the fence from the Soviets and the communists and kind of define themselves as being anti-communist. And the thing about it is, if you define yourself as anti-communist, you're going to find yourself being sympathetic to a lot of fascist positions.
Yeah.
And so, I think America has always had a very difficult time reconciling like the popular notion in American culture that fascists are evil with the fact that American culture has a lot of overlap with fascist ideals, right? I do have a question for you. So you kept saying how Franco was very pro-monarchy. So why didn't he reinstate the monarchy after he came to power? Like you said, the Republicans got rid of the monarchy. If he's so pro-monarchist, why didn't he like go to the royal family in exile or whatever and be like, cool, you're the kings now?
So he did.
Okay.
But he declared himself regent.
Uh-huh.
To continue leading the country.
Okay.
And in doing this, he also had like the ability to name who his successor would be.
Okay.
When he died in 1974, I think part of why he had to wait is because according to law, like you have to wait till the successor is, I think like 30 years old. So he had, maybe this will be too into the weeds. There were like basically two choices of who could be the next monarch. And you know how in Britain there's like the like Tudors versus like the...
You're thinking of like the
War of the Roses.
War of the Roses. Yorks and Lancastrians.
Yeah. So in Spain, similar thing. I forget their names though. One is Bourbon and then the other one I don't remember.
Sure. Yeah. The House of Bourbon would be related to the French royal house. That doesn't exist, of course, in the 20th century.
Yeah.
But
so basically he had a choice between those two. He chooses one. When he dies, that dude becomes king and he's like, cool, we're going to be a democracy now, and transitions the country into a democracy.
Got it. Okay.
It's so funny because he gets chosen because Franco believes that he's going to be a bit more conservative. And he's immediately like, cool, democracy.
Interesting.
But yes, the short answer is like he did, and he was regent.
Got it. So you talked about, this growth of Spanish horror that is in our future. And like, you cannot understate how much Jesus Franco is
the reason for
the
that?
instigator of that. Like, and this movie is the instigator of that. People who are Franco fans know that he made 173 movies in his lifetime, like directed 173 movies in his lifetime. He was extremely prolific. A lot of those were horror, and that kind of brute forced the creation of like a Spanish horror genre, because it's like, well, if this one guy is making like 5 Spanish horror movies a year and they're doing well, and then, you've got the copycats coming in, and there's always more copycats than there are of like the originals, pretty soon you've got like a lot of Spanish horror movies getting made, right? But Franco did all kinds of different genres, it should be stressed. And in later parts of his career, like his career has very distinct phases. I think the people who are Franco fans mostly think of him in his like late 60s, early 70s era, where he made a lot of like erotic vampire movies, basically. Towards like the 80s and 90s, like his movies get really low budget. Like a lot of those 173 movies that he made, he's like self-funding or like just kind of doing for the sake of the game. And by the 90s, like he's doing like hardcore porno. And so like the horror drops away and the eroticism sticks around kind of thing, right? So he does a lot of stuff. He was born in Madrid as Jesus Franco Menera on May 12th, 1930. And he was from a prominent family that came from Cuba and Mexico originally. At a young age, his interests were comics and music, specifically jazz. His father disapproved of his interest in jazz music and enrolled him in a religious university in 1949. Franco dropped out of the religious university and instead went to attend the Madrid Royal Conservatory as part of his dream to become a jazz pianist. So he studied music, worked hard on that, but then he sort of switched interests to film and cinema and wanted to pursue a film career. So he left the Madrid Royal Conservatory and attended film school in Madrid. But then he was suspended in his second year at the Madrid Film School. So in 1951, he traveled to Paris to attend film school there. And he put himself through school by taking gigs as a pianist in nightclubs and writing pulp novels under the name David Kuhn.
Wait, isn't that an actual person?
No, you're thinking of Kuntz.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
After graduating, he struggled to get his career afloat, which, like, big mood. And by 1954, when he's 24 years old, he's beginning to find work as an assistant director. And he worked on over 20 films with other directors, working as an AD, before finally directing his first feature film in 1959, which wouldn't be released until 1961, which is kind of like a recurring thing in Franco's career, but I guess is not specific to him. It's like a Spanish film industry thing overall, where because of like a complicated tax rebate system, movies often didn't come out until like a few years after they were shot, or something like that. There was this whole policy where producers wanted a movie to break even before it even got to theaters. So you would like produce the movie and put all your money into it, and then there was tax rebates for doing Spanish movies to, you know, promote the film industry like we've seen in other countries. But like, if you think about like, okay, then after making the movie, you file your taxes, you put all the movie's financial records into those taxes, and then they would wait to get the rebate back. And then at that point, the movie would be at like break even, like you're no longer in the hole, but you haven't made profit yet. And then you put it into theaters. So everything from the theater is profit because you made your money back on the tax rebate. So you have to go through that whole tax process before the producers were willing to put a movie into theaters.
Wow.
So his first feature film, he directed it in 1959. It came out in 1961. By 1962, he had directed 5 feature films, 3 of which had been released in the previous year. So from 59 to 62, he's done 5 movies in 3 years. And they're in a variety of genres, including comedies and musicals. So while filming a musical comedy called Vampiresses 1930, which has nothing to do with vampires. It's not horror at all. It's
probably like femme fatale vampire.
Yeah. So it's a tribute to the Gold Diggers series of 1930s Hollywood musicals, which in Spain, like Gold Diggers of 1933 was called Vampiresses of 1933 or whatever. Like that was the translation for Gold Diggers.
Nice. Okay, that's cool.
So yeah, so he's making this like tribute movie, and he convinces his producers to watch Hammer's Brides of Dracula, saying that he could make movies in a similar vein, but with his own style. So he got the French co-producer of Vampiresses 1930, Eurocine, to sign off on co-producing the picture, which was basically like, as you mentioned, kind of what you needed to do to get movies off the ground in Spain was have that co-production element. And then Franco wrote the screenplay for this movie as well. So it's written and directed by him. It is very clearly based on Eyes Without a Face.
Which also makes sense for it being a French co-production.
Yeah, like it's really clearly like all the critics noticed it right away. Like it was very clearly this Eyes Without a Face ripoff. Though Franco claimed that he was more inspired by Universal horrors of the 40s and also the current early 60s trend of European crime movies, which were often based on the works of Edgar Wallace, who, like, we saw some movies based on his stuff in the 30s, Door with Seven Locks, Dark Eyes of London. Specifically, the lead mad scientist character of this movie is a character named Dr. Orloff, who is like a criminal mad scientist who does evil science experiments. That's the character that Bela Lugosi played in Dark Eyes of London, aka the Human Monster, where he was like the scientist doing like weird experiments on like homeless people in London, and it was all very grisly, right?
Yeah, I think we found that movie to be like very much like a police procedural.
Yes. And that was kind of the trendy thing in Europe, was like dark crime movies that kind of straddled that line into horror. And you can kind of see like that's where Fantaterror ends up kind of coming from, is the combination of like bringing supernatural into those kinds of movies. It's also kind of what spawns Giallo in Italy, which are like initially very much like serial killer movies. But here, like, this is definitely a horror movie. But like Franco has taken it's fanfic in a way. Like, he's taken the character of Dr. Orloff, played by Bela Lugosi in this 1938 British movie, and like imported it to be his main villain in this movie.
I love it.
And, you know, one of the advantages of being in a country that's like very economically and culturally like cut off from other countries is you don't really give a shit about their copyright laws so much.
I was thinking more like, oh, people will just think this is original.
Sure. Yeah.
To remind folks about Eyes Without a Face, so we covered that back in episode 289, and it's written by a Jean Redon. He is a French writer and screenwriter. I remember when we were doing the research for this guy, there's not a lot of information about him, like his origins or anything like that. But what I was able to determine is that he really didn't start working on screenplay adaptations or being like a dialogue writer until he made connections as a press agent at Warner Brothers for the French office. Now, he had published the novel Les Yeux Sans Visage in 1959 as part of the Anguish collection from a publisher called Fleur Noir, Black River. It's pulp. And yeah, it's the Anguish collection, but that included stuff from like fantasy, horror, suspense, supernatural, basically just any kind of like genre stuff. And so he adapted his own novel into the 1960 film by Georges Franju. And overall, like, we liked it. You and I did disagree about whether it counted as horror. Like, I was a bit more feeling like this was more like thriller, maybe film noir, not quite. And you were like, no, I think this is horror. Part of what limited us feeling like there was like a full delineation of genre is because it is a bit artsy.
Yes.
Because it's French.
Yeah. It's like almost like too beautiful and dreamlike and arty to really like scare you all that much. Although granted, like we're coming at it from a, you know, modern standpoint. I know that like at the time, the whole thing with this mad scientist like cutting people's faces off to graft them onto like his daughter's face, and like the gruesomeness of that was considered like really boundary pushing. Where did we end up ranking Eyes Without a Face?
It is currently ranked at number 69.
Nice. And you know, it's interesting that like the writer of that came from a pulp tradition, because as I mentioned, Franco wrote pulp novels on the side under a pseudonym, right? And he's writing this movie. So he's kind of bringing in that Edgar Wallace influence and this character of Dr. Orloff into a plot that's very much like an Eyes Without a Face ripoff, but with like the visual style of like 1940s Universal horror films.
A really neat hodgepodge of different things going on here.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, at the time, as you sort of alluded to, the Spanish censors under the Franco government were very concerned about films that portrayed Spain in a negative light or could potentially damage the country's international reputation. So for this reason, Franco sets the film in France. It's like, see, we don't have serial killer mad scientists in Spain. We're a good, wholesome Catholic country. It's over in France that they have those kinds of things, right? Franco was also very concerned with how the censors would treat the content of like the country's first horror movie when, you know, the regime was highly conservative, right? And as we said, like fascists don't like horror movies. So to this end, he created two versions of the movie, which ends up becoming more than two versions once you start throwing in dubs and the changes that dubs make and everything. But in terms of running time, there are two versions of the movie. Talking about these two versions is a little difficult because there's one version that's consistently called the uncut or uncensored version. That version's 6 minutes shorter than what is like considered the censored version. So like when you think uncut, you think it'll have more material. And so it's not really fair to call them the uncut or, you know, edited versions or censored versions, especially because Franco kind of preemptively created these two versions to get around the censors, so it's not even fair to say that one of them is censored in so much as it's self-censored. I'm going to be talking about the French version and the Spanish version. The French version is what's commonly called the uncut or uncensored version. It runs 87 minutes. The Spanish version, or the censored version, runs 93 minutes. And what the actual difference is here is the French version has all of the nudity and gore. And the Spanish version doesn't have that, but instead has like extra scenes of the investigation. There's like an inspector character who's trying to solve these murders and find the mad scientist. And there's more scenes of him doing this investigation. There's more plot exposition.
Yeah, I was going to say it's probably the talking that makes it longer.
Yes. So you have more dialogue scenes in the Spanish version. And so what this means is, and when I say French and Spanish, I'm mostly talking about the markets that those two movies were designed to play in, given that this was a Spanish-French co-production, right? What makes things difficult is you can't really create like a full-length version that has all of the material from both versions in it, because the shorter edit with the gore and the nudity has a French language dub. And the longer version with the extra dialogue scenes has a Spanish language dub. Those extra scenes in the Spanish version were never dubbed in French or English.
Makes sense.
The extra scenes in the French version were never dubbed into Spanish. So if you tried to create a version that has everything, you're going to end up with a movie that is going to have multiple languages, weirdly. Like people will have to switch languages throughout. Then you've got like, you know, the fact that, okay, there's this French and Spanish version. Different countries would take either one of those versions to use as the basis for their dubs, depending on what the censorship laws were in that country. So there's an English dub, but the English dub, weirdly enough, they did the English dub in Britain for the French version. And then when the movie finally came to America, the Americans didn't use the Spanish version. They used the English dub that had already been made for the French version and then cut down the nudity and gore out of it, so that the American version is the French version with the nudity and gore removed, which means there's no English dub for the Spanish version.
Yeah.
So that's all very complicated.
And so that also means that the American version doesn't have the investigator scenes.
Yeah, or like not as many. He's still in the movie, right? But so it's all a little complicated with these multiple versions. And of course, as was common for European films of this period, Franco employed an international cast who just spoke their own languages on set, with everything to be dubbed later. So if you start talking about like, well, what's the correct language to view the film in, it gets a little complicated. This is a Spanish-French co-production. It was primarily filmed in Madrid, but it is set in Paris. So a lot of the actors are Spanish, but the characters are all French. And there's two lead roles. And what I find really funny is that depending on which version you're seeing, one of them gets credited with top billing or the other one does. So the role of this inspector, who's kind of our hero trying to find Dr. Orloff, is played by Conrado San Martin, who plays Inspector Tanner. And he was a 40-year-old Spanish actor who'd been really, really popular in the 50s. And by this point, his popularity is just starting to be on the downswing, such that he can get hired to appear in a sort of sleazy horror movie, right? That kind of situation. He has top billing in the Spanish version. The actor who plays Dr. Orloff was a French-speaking German-Swiss actor named Howard Vernon. He has top billing in the French version. And so on set, like most of the cast spoke Spanish, being from either Spain or Spanish-speaking countries like Argentina, but Vernon as Orloff spoke French on set. So again, it's that situation where if you're watching the French dub, you're going to hear Orloff's voice. If you're watching the Spanish dub, you're going to hear the rest of the cast's voices, but not his. So there's no pure version. You kind of have to make a choice, right? Speaking of Howard Vernon, who plays Dr. Orloff here, he was born Mario Walter Lippert in 1908 in Germany to a Swiss father and a German mother.
No relation to Lippert pictures, right? Because
No.
that's in Britain.
Yeah, no relation at all. And because he, this is very, I don't want to say it's very common, but it's reasonably common when you grow up in Switzerland. He grew up trilingual.
Yeah.
Now, because of where Switzerland is and what the dominant ethnicities in Switzerland are, you'd maybe expect German, French, Italian, but he actually grew up speaking German, French, and English. He studied acting in Berlin and then made his stage debut in 1936. He acted in Switzerland for a while before he moved to Paris. And then the Nazi occupation happened, and he ended up working for the German-run television service in Paris because he could speak both German and French, and he was from a neutral country. So he gave an appearance of
being unbiased.
Yeah, of sort of that neutrality, right? He moved to England in 1944, where he worked for the BBC as a translator. And then after the liberation of Paris, he moved back there and found work in post-war French cinema, often playing evil Nazis and other villains. This film was his first collaboration with Franco, but the two became friends, and Franco would end up casting him in like a lot of his movies going forward. So we're going to see a lot more of Howard Vernon as we go. As I mentioned, Vernon spoke French for the role of Dr. Orloff, which is appropriate given the movie's French setting. Everyone else spoke Spanish. As I mentioned, the film was shot in Madrid, and it premiered in Madrid on March 9th, 1962, under the title Gritos en la Noche, or Screams in the Night. The French premiere came in Paris on October 1st of 1962, under the title L'Horrible Docteur Orloff, which you would think, the horrible Dr. Orloff, right? It was then released in the UK with an X rating in late 1963 as The Demon Doctor.
Sure.
Before finally coming to the US on October 7th, 1964, with the title The Awful Dr. Orloff.
He's so awful.
Now, why wouldn't they just call it The Horrible Dr. Orloff? That French title, translates pretty directly. Well, it's because when it came to the States, it was on a double bill with an Italian horror film that was made later than this called The Horrible Dr. Hitchcock.
Oh, yeah, it's a little repetitive.
So you have this double bill of The Awful Dr. Orloff and The Horrible Dr. Hitchcock, and I think like in English, Awful Orloff, Horrible Hitchcock, right? So despite a negative critical reception, this picture was a big financial success, establishing a market for Spanish-made horror and exploitation movies, right? Like we get all of the Spanish movies to come because this one was successful, right? But as I said, not critically well received. The New York Times declared that the adjective in the title was not only descriptive, but accurate.
Oh, no.
Monthly Film Bulletin said the movie was at once both appalling and unique.
I mean, that's almost a compliment.
Yeah. Everyone pretty much called it out for being an Eyes Without a Face ripoff, but because Eyes Without a Face is so like arty and respectable, basically, from that artiness, this movie got called out for being kind of sleazy, and the violence and the nudity got like heavily criticized and all that kind of stuff. But the picture's success did lead Jess Franco to make 7 sequels to it throughout his career.
Damn.
The last of which came out in 1988, with Howard Vernon regularly reprising the role of Dr. Orloff.
Amazing. I love this.
What's funny is like, maybe not early in the 60s, but Franco fans tend to see the Orloff movies as always coming like at the start of a new era in Franco's filmography.
Oh,
like it'd be
interesting.
like, oh, I'm going to change to doing something else. As the palate cleanser, I'm going to come back to Dr. Orloff and then like, embark on the next thing. So a remastered Blu-ray came out from Kino Lorber in 2013. That is the French version, is the only version on that Blu-ray because it's the uncut, quote unquote, version. because of that, the Kino Blu-ray only has the French and English dubs because obviously French dub with French version, and then the English dub does have the extra scenes in English for the UK market versus it was censored for the US market. So there's no way in North America to watch the Spanish version. There is a German DVD that has both the French version and the Spanish version in Spanish dub and French dub, but the only subtitles on that DVD are German.
We really need to learn other languages.
Yeah. So it's kind of up to you, Sarah, because I've got kind of the French version on the nice Blu-ray, like with English subtitles, like in the hopper, ready to go. Or I do also have the full-length Spanish version, but the subtitle situation might be a little wonky.
I say we go with the French version because since it's gotten that Blu-ray release, I'm making the assumption it will be the easiest one for other folks to go and find and see.
Yeah. I think like usually we try to stick with like the film's quote unquote original language. And so you think, okay, Spanish director, made in Madrid, we should be watching the Spanish version. And, you know, the Spanish version's longer and has more dialogue scenes and all this kind of stuff. But then like it gets complicated with, okay, but it's a French co-production. It's set in France. The lead actor spoke French. And like I said, there's no pure version. There's no definitive version. It's either this or that, right?
Well, I think the thing to also keep in mind is the co-production and the different languages that would have been spoken on set mean that this unique, heterogeneous version is the most quote-unquote pure version.
Sure. So we're going to, I guess, be watching then L'Horrible Docteur Orloff.
Well, folks, hopefully you can find a copy of this Blu-ray. You said it was from 2013,
yeah. So
maybe it's at the local library. You're going to hear a brief musical interlude, and when we come back, we will discuss The Horrible Dr. Orloff from 1962, directed by Jesus Franco.
See you on the other side, everybody.
Welcome back to Scream Scene. We just finished watching The Horrible Dr. Orloff, The Awful Dr. Orloff.
Gritos en la Noche.
A movie by any other name, directed by Jesus Franco from 1962. Ben, first thoughts?
So...
It's not good.
Oh, interesting. Okay, interesting.
You're like, this was better than Frankenstein for me.
I do think it's kind of wild that the original Spanish version of this movie is so hard to get a hold of. Mm-hmm. Like, I did find a version, but it lacked English subtitles. So our best bet was the Kino Blu-ray, which has the French version with the English or French dubbing. But when you look at the Spanish version, like, obviously it's got better dubbing in that, like, everyone's lips match what they're saying. Yeah. And in some cases it has better editing. It lacks the nudity of the French version, but the nudity in the French version sometimes doesn't make sense.
It's very shoehorned.
Yeah. You get the sense looking at the Spanish version that they shot the scenes without nudity and then did the nude versions as like inserts that could be put into the movie later. And the Spanish version's the longer version. It's got more stuff in it. Like, yes, the movie's set in France and Vernon is speaking French, but everyone else is speaking Spanish. And watching the Spanish version, even just like scanning around in the timeline to compare and contrast, the Spanish version just feels more complete. I think the Spanish version should be considered the primary version, and it feels very strange in this day and age to see an HD release from a company like Kino that doesn't have the original language option. Anyways, I just wanted to get that comment out of the way first.
Yeah, it almost makes me wonder if, like, you know, that is Jesus Franco, made the movie, but his producers were like, yeah, but we really want to kind of push the envelope. And he's like, sure, I'm into that. And the fact that he later in his career really goes into no more horror, but more exploitation, the assumption has become that, well, this is the version that he wanted to make because he wrote this, right? So if he had wanted to include tits, he would have written them in more naturally.
Yeah, it's one of these cases where, and this is true for a lot of horror movies and other types of movies too, but one of these cases where I think narratives build around films that are quickly put to bed by just watching the damn movie. Like, you know, so many cases where someone says like, oh yeah, like in such and such a movie, you can see like a dead body.
I love such and such a movie.
Right. You can see like a dead body in the background. And then you go and you watch the movie and it's like, no, it's not there. Like you saw a shadow on a bad VHS tape 40 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, and so when you just look at these versions in comparison, I think it becomes clear the Spanish version is the main one. But I think you're right. I think the fact that Franco's career went very tits heavy later on, you know, gives people the impression that the French version is the primary one. With that all said and done, I liked this movie. Or like, I liked 50% of this movie might be fairer to say.
Okay.
But I think it's good. I don't think it's great. I think it's like mid, but like the mid side of good, you know?
So full disclosure, listeners, my brain has just been Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein non-fucking stop since we watched it. And Ben's feedback after the movie, his response to the movie was like, that was good, but, you know, kind of mid in terms of like Del Toro's oeuvre. And now hearing you talk about this movie as being mid, I'm just like, these are not the same movies, Ben.
Yeah, I mean,
I know that that's not what you're doing, but that's what my emotional impulse is.
Yes, so now you're ready to fight me.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay. For the record, Del Toro's Frankenstein's like an 8 out of 10 for me. I just wanted it to be a 10 out of 10.
Sure.
Anyways, the plot's very simple. So I think we can get through at least that part of it. Not too...
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, fairly quickly.
So the way the movie presents itself, it does have kind of a what year is it vibe, but luckily we do get a date on a poster. So we know it is set in 1912 Paris. And as we open, we see a strange man with bulging eyes and a scarred face kidnapping women. We see that he has an accomplice, this man with a cane who kind of taps it to have the man with bulging eyes follow along. Now this is the fifth woman who's been kidnapped and presumably found dead. But don't worry, because Inspector Tanner is on the case. But he's finding the case to be a little challenging because of conflicting reports of the man's description. He determines that, okay, this must be two men, and gets these two descriptions. We learn that the man with the cane, who in the beginning seems like an accomplice, is actually Dr. Orloff, the mastermind, if you will. And the man with the bulging eyes and scarred face is his henchman, Morpho. Which I can't say without thinking about Metamorpho.
That's fair.
It's so silly. So Morpho kidnaps the women. In some cases, Dr. Orloff kind of lures them in by being like a gentleman with money. They take these women back to Orloff's place, and the ultimate goal is to use these women's skin grafts to cure his daughter Melissa's facial scarring from a fire.
Yeah.
Now, Melissa is like kept in this glass case like she's Snow White.
Yeah, it's a little strange.
It's a little strange. And the way that they've been doing the skin grafts is killing the woman and then doing the skin grafts. Makes sense. The other character in this castle, I'll call her a housemaid. I believe her name was Danny.
No. So Danny's the woman that we see Dr. Orloff lure to the like abandoned house to get killed by Morpho. The like housemaid character's name is Amy, or like it's not said like that. It's said with like an accent, but it's like Amy, you know?
Okay, well we'll call her Amy.
Yeah.
She is here. You know, she's kind of a sounding board for Orloff because Morpho doesn't really speak. And he needs someone to rant and rave to.
We need someone to get plot exposition out
Exactly.
to. Yeah.
So Amy is like, I don't think this is a good idea. Like, I'm really against all this. And Orloff is like, no, this is the whole reason why I faked your and Morpho's death out of the prison when I was a prison doctor, because I needed to find a way to get out of that job and into fixing my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah, we learn like some backstory for these people. Like basically Morpho was a psychopathic serial killer kind of guy who is only now blind and mute and like kind of a dumb brute monster because Orloff has used him for like experiments.
Yeah.
And we know that like Amy kind of likes or like is fond of Morpho in like a,
oh, you poor thing.
yeah, like a almost like a pet kind of way. And Orloff rescued Amy from the prison because at one point maybe they were in love, but now he's obsessed with fixing his daughter and he's gone too far. And he of course like is mean to Morpho just like you'd expect.
Yeah. So that's what's going on in the castle.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Tanner has a police sketch of Morpho and Orloff, but he's still not having any luck getting any leads. So his fiance, who is a ballet dancer, her name is Wanda, decides she's going to Lois Lane up this shit, and dress as a, quote, cheap hussy to try to be targeted and therefore find the killers. She discovers Dr. Orloff at the like local dive bar.
It's like a music hall.
Yeah. But when she's about to make contact, she chickens out and runs off. Meanwhile, as Tanner is following up leads, he finds himself interacting with the local drunk. He's kind of like, you know, a fun rascal. He's drunk all the time, but he might have some leads because he has his ear to the ground. He comes up because he tried to pawn some jewelry that turned out to be from one of the dead girls. And he explains that like, well, I got it near this boathouse and there's a castle downstream. Maybe you should check that out. Tanner's a little incompetent, so he doesn't check it out.
Yeah, he's like constantly being handed leads all throughout this movie. And I think the impression we're supposed to be getting is, you know, this is like one of those red ball cases where we're looking for this murderer and like a million people all the time are giving you like confessions and, oh, it's my neighbor and, oh, this lead, that lead. And so he doesn't know like
what's real, what's not.
Right. But in the context of watching the movie, you just sort of continually see people going up to him and be like, hey, Inspector, it's that guy over there, pointing to the villain, and him going, nah, leave me alone. I'm busy.
Truly exactly like that. So as Tanner fumbles around, Wanda decides to try again, and she ends up making contact with Orloff and goes with him to the castle. But she does manage to send a message to Tanner that's like, hey, this is Wanda, found the killer.
Come save me.
Come save me. This is an urgent letter. And Tanner gets it, and he's like, urgent? Whatever.
I'll read this later.
And it's like hours later. It's. I think it's played for laughs a little bit, because this movie likes to find ways to play for laughs. But it's just kind of like, my guy, you are so incompetent. You're supposed to be like the best cop on the force.
He's the only one who acts like a gentleman, and isn't like a thug, I guess. That's his claim to fame. I like, at least Tanner is doing some actual investigation during this part. He's digging up the records on Orloff and Morpho from the prison and finding out everybody's backstories and stuff. But like multiple times people are like, hey, Inspector, what about that urgent message you got? And he's like, it's fine. I'll read it tomorrow.
I'll do it this afternoon.
While we're actively seeing Wanda, like, getting brought to the castle or whatever.
Yeah, so she's threatened. In classic Lois Lane fashion, things don't go well, and she's being threatened. Tanner eventually makes his way to go help her. At some point in the movie between now and when I first introduced Amy, she has a fight with Orloff, being like, no, I really don't want us to be doing this. It's right around when Orloff is like, you know what? I think the problem I've been having with these skin grafts is that the women need to be alive for me to take the skin grafts off, and then they can die or be used for experiments. I don't care, but they need to be living as I pull their skin off of them. Mm-hmm. Amy's like, this is far enough. They fight. She dies.
In the weirdest way, given how violent the rest of the movie is, he pushes her up against like an iron gate, and then she collapses over dead. Like, I think maybe she was supposed to have hit her head on the iron bars or something, but it really just looks like he kind of just pushes her and then she's dead. It's very weird.
She's just really fragile, Ben.
I guess.
Yeah. Now he hides the fact that Amy is dead from Morpho, because Morpho and Amy, they had that kind of relationship. She was the only person who kind of showed him any kind of kindness. So Orloff is like, yeah, Amy went out for cigarettes and she'll be back soon.
Yeah.
Now, when Wanda's under threat, Morpho stumbles by and finds Amy's body and gets quite mad and ends up killing Orloff. In some kind of strange way, Melissa, the daughter, happens to die at around that same time. It's unclear what's going on.
Yeah, the vibe you get is like that she's sort of died of like, I don't know, a heart attack.
Took too long
or something.
Now your daughter's gone.
Yeah.
She died because of plot.
Yeah.
The poeticness.
Right. She dies because her dad died.
Yeah. So Morpho then takes Wanda and he's like wandering along the like top of the castle. When finally Tanner arrives, he shoots at Morpho. So Morpho falls and dies, and Wanda is saved. Case is solved, and now they can get married. The end. So here's the thing. The parts that I did like about the movie, it had some neat cinematography. It had some like really interesting use of lights. It definitely in the castle had very gothic mise-en-scène and framing and all of that. But there's not really anything exciting going on here with the story. The special effects with like the makeup is meh. It's whatever. I think it's like neat for both a country's first horror movie and a director's first horror movie, especially this being like his fifth movie overall. But I don't think that there's a lot here to engage with, except the fact that there's that interesting thing you brought up about like the censorship issue and, tits versus exposition. I feel like we've kind of already talked about that, but like that to me is something that's a little interesting. But otherwise, there wasn't anything in this movie that really worked for me. So can you tell me a bit more about like why you're like, oh, this was mid and on like the good side of mid? Like what worked for you?
So, I mean, I will admit that like everything in this movie has kind of a pro-con sort of situation going on. Like we talked about the what year is it vibes. So like everyone drives around in carriages, and like they wear like top hats and opera capes and stuff.
Yeah, it might as well be like Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah, it's like vaguely Victorian in the era, but then like all the main female characters, not like side characters, but all the main female characters have very 1960s fashions and hair and makeup with like an emphasis on like very form-fitting slinky dresses. And
hourglass shapes.
Yeah, and so like until we hit that poster that says 1912, which is like a poster for Faust being performed at the opera, which is like a Phantom of the Opera reference, I think. You're not sure if it's just, well, maybe, you know, all these carriages we're seeing are just because we're like downtown in an old European city and whatever. Like maybe it is the 60s. But no, it's 1912. I will say, I think the movie's greatest asset is I think it looks great.
Yeah.
I think it's got fantastic cinematography, like right off the bat with deep shadows, very good framing. Use of mise en scène is exceptionally good. The Dutch angles are very well deployed. I think the costumes are pretty good. All the women in their 1960s slinky, sexy costumes are really sexy. So, you know, goal achieved. The costumes that Wanda wears when she's trying to look like a cheap hussy.
So, like the first one, fine. But the one that she wears when she gets fully kidnapped is like, imagine it just like probably a silk or like a satin kind of material, very form-fitting. But on the front, where like the bust is, there's like a giant heart where like the tops of the bust are like the top humps of the heart.
Right.
And you know how sometimes there are like these brooches that have a chain between them, and in like old style clothing you would wear that up by like maybe your collarbone and it kind of like loops down. Mon Mothma wears something similar like that.
Sure.
Well, Wanda wears them so that the brooch is attached on each of her nipples. So it just seems like a chain between a couple of nipple piercings.
Yeah,
It looks so ugly. I'm like, this doesn't even look like fashion. This just looks like, look at the tits.
Well, and like, you know,
get your tits here.
She's got a great rack and the movie knows it and she knows it.
But she should have a better fashion sense.
Sure.
Like, my God, it's awful.
She's definitely the bustiest ballerina I've ever seen in a movie. So yeah, like this is what I'm saying though. There's this kind of like push-pull, pro-con. I think the authentic European locations gives a help to the production in the sense of like, hey, when we go to the mad scientist's castle, we're at a real castle. I think the editing is really good here. The murder or kidnapping or whatever you want to call them, the assault scenes are, I think, very well done. There's the opening one, which has Morpho attacking this woman in like her room. And we see like people from across the street, like going to their windows and like watching. And like, it's all very like high horror. There's another one with the character Danny, where Orloff lures her to like an abandoned house, pretending it's like his big mansion. And then she gets locked inside with Morpho, who like stalks her through the empty halls. And that's like really creepy and well done and cool. I think that the movie's very good at mood and atmosphere, especially during these stalking and assaulting scenes.
Yeah.
I think those are like the high point of the movie. And it's like a horror movie. So the fact that the scary scenes are the high point is like good, right?
Yeah.
The flip side, the plot, even if it wasn't a ripoff of Eyes Without a Face, is still immensely predictable.
Here's the thing. I don't think it's a ripoff of Eyes Without a Face because it's so tangential to what is going on. It's almost just like the instigating incident.
I think it makes sense that Franco took umbrage with that characterization and was like, no, my inspirations were these other things.
Because that's 100% what it is. It's almost just like that was just the seed from which this garden grew.
Well, but on the other hand, like on paper, it's like, hey, there's a mad scientist who's capturing women to kill them and take their faces off in order to repair the face of his daughter, which was burned off in an incident, in an accident. Like that's exactly the same. The difference is that like the French movie gets all concerned with, it really focuses on the daughter. Like the daughter's the main character and it focuses on her kind of, I don't know, dreamlike nightmare sort of existence. Whereas the daughter does not fucking matter in this movie. She's just in a fucking Sleeping Beauty box and you know, as you said, just kind of does nothing except die conveniently at the end of the story. So it's like Franco kind of uses Eyes Without a Face to inform what the plot is, but then stylistically what he cares about is much more of like a pulp sensibility than an artsy one. And so we've got the Universal horror stuff and the Edgar Wallace thriller stuff. It's very similar to Dark Eyes of London in the way that the police investigation takes up like half the runtime.
Yeah.
And, you know, at the time when we watched Dark Eyes of London, we kind of saw it as a precursor to your like Silence of the Lambs, Criminal Minds kind of subgenre, where it's like, yeah, we're tracking like a horrific serial killer, but the emphasis is on like the police detectives. And so it's not really horror, because this has the like mad scientist and his like disfigured assistant and the castle and all these other things. Like this does, I think, lean more into horror.
I think also because the police activity is a source of a lot of like comedy or black comedy. Whereas Dark Eyes of London, it's serious. There's no comedy in those scenes.
The plot is very predictable. I think this is a movie that tells you like you should be enjoying this for the aesthetics, not the story, right? Because if you've seen enough of these movies, you'll know every beat long before it happens. So the only questions you have is like, how long will it take for like Chekhov's gun to go off, and how stylish will it be? And I think luckily the movie is quite stylish.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Tanner takes fucking forever to open up the fucking letter.
Yeah, it's really too bad the police investigation stuff takes up so much of the movie, because it really is bad. Tanner is like a well-meaning, egotistical idiot. And it's not so much egotistical in the sense of like, I'm so great, and more just like, I am important and this is important and everything that I say and do is important. And it's kind of this weird tunnel vision.
Yeah.
So he's constantly blind to like obvious clues, to the extent that most of the time we spend with him feels like wasted time. And like, especially the amount of time it takes for him to be like, well, everyone's giving me these conflicting descriptions, and you know, some of them say it's like this guy and some of them say it's like that guy, and it takes him so long to be like, what if there were two guys?
Yeah. Which I thought was like an interesting thing. Like I don't know, we got to see that it was two guys, but if we didn't get to see that, I think that would have been an interesting part of the movie. I think the problem is that the movie itself recognizes that Tanner isn't successful, because Wanda has to come in and Lois Lane.
Right. And the stuff with Wanda is great, actually. I really like Wanda. I like her scenes. She proves herself to be very like capable. Like
I don't get why she's a ballerina.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know.
It feels very, honestly, the vibe I got was like when you're playing with kids and the kid is like, I'm a ballerina, but I'm also a cop and a T-Rex. It's like, okay, cool. You can do that.
Like
cool. You can be a ballerina.
They want her to be like, something that's like sexy and also prestigious.
Distinguished.
In a way where it's like, the joke is kind of that like Tanner's punching above his weight class. Like they get introduced with him being like, how did a, you know, rough and tumble detective like me ever get with like a beautiful high class ballerina like you? And she's like, no, like how did like a simple dancer like me ever get with like a brilliant investigator like you? You know, it's that kind of thing. I like Wanda. She, as I said, proves herself very capable when Orloff like roofies her drink. When he's seducing her, she like switches the glasses kind of thing and doesn't get drugged and kind of pretends at it so she can go wandering around the castle. And I think ultimately Tanner's incompetent because they're kind of working backwards from the ending, where like for maximum tension at the ending, he needs to come in and save her just in the nick of time, which means he has to come in at the last minute, which means he has to take forever to recognize obvious clues.
But like time is fluid in in a movie, you know?
Yeah, no, that's fair.
And so you bring up an interesting thing as well. It's related to the mise en scène of the movie. And the movie puts a lot of emphasis on mirrors being in so many scenes.
Yeah.
And in a like way for people to interact with. And when you have a movie where, okay, we're doing this because of skin grafts and like for a burn victim, like the mirrors play a part, but they're there. People might interact with them, but there's no connection to it in a thematic level beyond that very surface.
Yeah, they mostly just provide a lot of different cool shots.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to get at is that, like, I think at this point in Franco's creative endeavors, he is trying to figure out how to do the aesthetics and hasn't quite figured out how to tie the aesthetics to the story's themes or meanings.
Sure. I mean, this is definitely like a style over substance exercise. I would agree with that. I do think using the mirrors shows an awareness that there is a thematic connection there.
No, for sure. But it's kind of like for the record, I'm not trying to put him down. I'm just saying that, like, we know that this is his 5th movie. It's been 3 years that he's been doing this. This is the first horror movie. Like, he is still just figuring things out. And I don't think that that's negative. I'm just trying to like offer a way to position this movie in the greater context of like where his career is, where Spain is, all of that.
Yeah, for sure. I think my flip side to all of that is that I think for a first time at bat, this movie like shows a really good understanding of like how to create like a suspenseful, scary scene, a sort of scary mood and atmosphere. It shows a very good like knowledge of the genre and its tropes. I mean, almost too good of a knowledge because it's so predictable. Like the first time that Orloff said anything mean to Morpho, I was like, cool, know how this movie ends.
Yeah.
But like, you know, it's knowing that like he wrote and directed it, you know, he's not being brought in to do this as like a director being assigned a job. Like this was his idea.
Yeah.
It really shows that like there's a lot of promise in this initial effort. So you can really see, at least in my opinion, how it successfully launched horror as a genre in Spain and like transformed Franco's career. Like I can see why people looked at this and were like, oh wow, like this could really go places.
Yeah.
To talk about some stuff that I just address some other things very quickly, I guess. The soundtrack, like the music, it's very eclectic.
You can definitely see his love of jazz.
Yes. I was going to say, like, I think it's to the point where it's probably down to personal taste if it enhances the movie or ruins it. I kind of see what it's going for a lot of times, where it's like, oh, this is very like off balance and off kilter, like the characters are and that kind of thing. Or like, oh, the percussion's going nuts because like this woman's getting attacked or something like that. But yeah, absolutely. The fact that he loved jazz makes the music make a lot more sense than it sort of does on its own.
And that's kind of also to my point of like, he's putting stuff here. It's not quite gelling. It's not quite cohesive, but he is figuring out how to put the pieces together.
For sure. For people who are listening to this, who maybe have seen a lot of Franco's movies, but not this one, if you're kind of curious, I will say he only zooms once in this movie.
It is a good zoom.
It's a good zoom, but Franco's very much known for his like zoom lens fetish later in his career. And then the other thing I would like to say about this movie is, as I mentioned, Diana Loris, who plays Wanda. I think she's very good. She's certainly very attractive, and the movie knows it. But I think she does the Lois Lane shtick like pretty well. She serves as a better protagonist than Tanner does. And then my other casting note is Howard Vernon, who plays Orloff, looks exactly like Michael Shannon with a Peter Lorre hairstyle. And it's like it really is like they look so similar to me that it was kind of distracting during the movie.
Yeah. I think he does a good job. Certainly interesting to see how he comes back for the next like 7 or 8 renditions of this movie.
Yeah.
Because he dies.
Yeah, he definitely dies.
Yeah. So we'll see.
But that's never stopped a horror villain before.
No, never. So let's move on to ranking.
So I have a feeling that I'm probably looking much higher up the list than you are.
Let me just give the ranking for Dark Eyes of London. So that movie is from 1939, and it is currently ranked at number 195 out of 312 movies.
Okay. So, definitely on the low end of midpoint. So I was looking above that.
Okay. I wasn't.
That's what I thought. My starting point wasn't Dark Eyes of London, though I can certainly see why you are looking there. That makes sense. I was looking at Eyes Without a Face, which we famously, I think, ranked a lot lower than people were expecting us to. It's up at number 69. Nice. As we mentioned earlier in the episode, I don't think this is as good as Eyes Without a Face. I don't think it's better than Eyes Without a Face.
Yeah, I was going to say, Ben.
Like, I think in some weird ways, if what you want is like a just straight down the line horror movie, you might like this better than Eyes Without a Face. But Eyes Without a Face is like unquestionably the better movie. But I started looking down from there. Couple spots down from that, number 72, La Marca del Muerto. That's the movie where it's the old man who has been surviving for all this time with like blood transfusions, and he gets his like younger descendant who's played by the same actor to like help him in the experiments. And I was like, okay, that's like kind of in and around the same genre as this. We've got like a mad scientist running around at night snatching ladies off the street. That's comparable. So I made that kind of my ceiling. Like I could see this being better than that, on a stylistic basis in places, who knows. Right beneath that is Brides of Dracula, which is kind of the movie that inspired the production of this movie. So again, I thought, okay, we're kind of in the right area here, maybe. Continuing to look down from there, I'm looking for, what do I think this is definitely better than? And I reached our movie from last week, The Premature Burial, at 94. I think, frankly, compared to this movie, Premature Burial's a little stagnant.
I can't believe this, Ben.
I think
what the fuck?
That Premature Burial's like, it's very nice to look at, but like it doesn't get the blood pumping the same way this movie does. It's not as scary as this movie. I think like this movie handles those like murder scenes like much more exciting than kind of anything in Premature Burial, frankly. So that was my range, 71 to 94.
I am flabbergasted. Okay, so I started looking at Dark Eyes of London 195.
Right.
Because that movie doesn't try to use comedy to soften a blow or anything, I was like, I think Dark Eyes of London is better than Horrible Dr. Orloff.
Right.
Looking around this area as well, we have things like Corpse Vanishes, Curse of the Cat People, like movies that have that aesthetic that we enjoyed in Dr. Orloff, but they solidify into a good movie. To be blunt, Ben, I don't know. I think you got distracted by too many tits.
Oh.
That's rude. I'm sorry. I'm poking fun.
Yeah, I like enjoyed this movie right off the bat. So this is like a really I was like, yeah, this is great. I didn't like the scenes with Tanner, but like everything else I liked.
But
so
there
this
are
is
so many scenes of Tanner.
It is a problem for sure. But it's very interesting to see that we've come down on very like different sides on this movie.
So I started looking down.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that as we go down, the movie that always comes up is The Neanderthal Man at 249. And I was like, I don't think that these two movies should be compared. I feel like just like on a craft level, like that does not make any sense. So I knew where the very bottom of the bottom. My actual floor ended up being Jungle Woman from 1944. So that's the sequel to Captive Wild Woman. But Jungle Woman, like, it has a couple of neat scenes, like the water swimming hunting scene, but like not really much going on there. So I was like, okay, that's definitely the floor. Looking up, Circus of Horrors at 239. Considered a horror classic. It's in color. It has some very cool things going on. It's boring and bland.
Yeah, did not like it.
Did not like it. And for me, Horrible Dr. Orloff, like it has some interesting visuals going on. It's trying to do some thematic things, but they never coalesce. And I'm like, like I feel like it could be on par with Circus of Horrors of like we're trying to evoke horror in like the aesthetics, and like Circus of Horrors is like color and circus, and it just doesn't work. So for me, my range is 239 to 244.
Wow. I will say, looking at this area of the list, like there's something that really stands out to me is like, I think maybe our hottest take on the list, which is that we ranked the Hammer Mummy movie below Plan 9 from Outer Space. Like,
I know Benito will never forgive us for that.
Amazing. Okay. So for the record, the midpoint between our ranges is 166, which is Dead Men Walk from 1943. It's also right next to like The Ghoul and the 1935 version of The Raven. What I'm curious about is, where did we rank Slaughter of the Vampires?
That is ranked at number 154.
Okay, because I will say that as we've been having this discussion, I've been thinking a lot about La Strage dei Vampiri, in that it also had like some really good aesthetics and some dark, spooky cinematography, and, got a real production value boost out of using a real castle, and had sexy babes, and, had, I think Dr. Orloff is perhaps like better in terms of being scarier with the like murder and the violence. But they also are very similar in the sense that the plot lines are extremely predictable, because Slaughter of the Vampires is just Dracula again, and Dr. Orloff is just sort of every mad scientist movie. So I think these are very comparable. And looking around that area, like I clearly like Dr. Orloff better than Slaughter of the Vampires, but I do think they are comparable. And I would certainly be like willing to come down in this direction. I think I would say that I prefer this to Dr. Renault's Secret, which is another mad scientist movie with a very similar, like he sends the disfigured assistant out to kidnap the women thing.
Yeah, it's tough because in that movie, like, I forget the name of the actor, but he's kind of like well known, and he plays the ape creature.
J. Carroll Nash.
Yeah, so he does a really good job. If you want to compare him and Morpho, like there's no comparison. But I would agree that like this is a very good area, and I feel like Dr. Renault's Secret is trying to do a lot of different things. If I remember correctly, I think it's an adaptation. But at the very least, we have ape creature, we have mad scientist, we have like village in probably like Eastern Europe. I just remember Lederhosen.
Yeah.
Listen, that movie it's from 1942. It's
that episode's episode 93. That was a long time ago.
Been a while. So I don't fully remember. But also the most grisly scene of that movie that I remember still is when they string up the dog.
Yeah.
And there are many more grisly scenes, and probably done in a way that is more grisly than that, just with like camera movements and framing and everything. So yeah, absolutely above Renault's Secret. I would, looking above, say that I would put El Fantasma del Convento at 146 as a possible ceiling.
Yeah, I don't think it goes much higher than Slaughter of the Vampires. I could even go a little lower because like we've got classics like Hands of Orlac and White Zombie that are kind of a little below, though it definitely goes above the 1934 Telltale Heart, I think. I think the high point of Dr. Orloff is the scene where it's Danny getting stalked through the empty house by Morpho. Like that's, you know, if you're going to watch one scene from this movie, that's the scene. Okay, I think this is better than Monster of Piedras Blancas, which is kind of the small town.
Yeah, I think Piedras Blancas does a really good job with it being entirely on location on the coast. It feels very much like Creature from the Black Lagoon inspired.
Yes.
I think though, like they do a commendable job with it being like outdoors and all of that, but that still means that you're not going to get the same kind of gothic lighting and framing and just drenched in shadow, successfully done, as you see in Dr. Orloff.
Yeah. Do we think this should go beneath Roger Corman's The Undead, which is his medieval witches, Bridie Murphy, modern dance rituals movie?
So I would put it below.
Okay. I'm willing to slot this movie in there as the compromise spot then.
Okay.
So that means that entering the list at the new number 149 is Gritos en la Noche, aka L'Horrible Docteur Orloff, aka The Awful Dr. Orloff, from 1962, directed by Jesus Franco.
If you would like to see this list, you can go to our website, screamscenepodcast.com. There you can find links to the other episodes that we have mentioned today, as well as our appeals box. If you would like to contest this or any other ranking, whether it should be higher or lower, please drop us a line through our Ask box on Tumblr. You can also email us at screamscenepodcast@gmail.com or find us on Blue Sky.
Scream Scene updates every other Wednesday on SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube Podcasts, basically any podcasting app you want to listen to the show on. You can find it by subscribing to our RSS feed. If you would like to help the show out, you can leave us a rating or a review on a podcasting app. We love to see it. Helps the algorithm push the show to new listeners. And that's really what we're looking for, is to help grow the listenership of the show. You can do that by sharing the show on social media, by telling people about it in your day-to-day life. If you really enjoy what we're doing, you can head on over to patreon.com/screamscenepodcast, where you can become a patron of the night for as little as $1 a month. Patrons at the $5 and $10 levels get access to regular bonus content like we talked about at the start of the show, and you can always go back through the entire back catalog. So if you're curious about that, we've got bonus episodes, all kinds of cool stuff over at patreon.com/screamscenepodcast.
So Ben, what are we watching next week?
Well, so next week, Sarah, we're going to be taking a look at a movie that I initially kind of passed over. I sort of went, this is psychological thriller. I don't think this is horror. But we have a sort of listener request from one of our listeners to check out this movie. So it is a Warner Brothers film written by Robert Bloch, the author of Psycho, starring Grant Williams, the lead from Incredible Shrinking Man, and it is called The Couch.
Oh, someone send this to JD Vance. We will see you then, creatures of the night.
Bye.
Bye.